Hi, this is Ofori. I'm the digital reader. I made this video because I've kind of been thinking about some things and actually going through some things on YouTube, not personal things, but just watching some stuff on YouTube. And I've decided I'm going to start reading comic books again. Not only going to start reading comic books, but some of these videos might include some of the comic books I've been reading. When I was young, I was an avid comic book reader, and I actually stopped when I started working at the University of Pennsylvania. I used to do HR there for 25 years. And the main reason I stopped is because, I know this is a crazy reason to stop, but it began to affect my credibility at work. And let me explain. University of Pennsylvania, and of course in Pennsylvania, is a huge institution. And when I started working HR in the University of Pennsylvania, I used to take the commuter train to work. And that commuter train, probably half the people on that train, they worked at the University of Pennsylvania. So when we got to that stop, everybody would get off. And what began to happen is people would see me, they'd know I work in HR, and even on the train, people would come over to me and say, "Hey, you're in HR, right?" And they sit down to me and blah, 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 start talking about something or an issue. Or when I would give trainings in HR, I would walk in and people like, "Hey, I saw you on a train." So because so many people from Penn were on that train, people would know my face and they would know I worked in HR. Well, when I first kind of started, people would come over to me and they'd see me reading a comic book, and it would kind of like change their whole view of me. I mean, at the time, University of Pennsylvania, I worked in the School of Medicine, so it was researchers and professors. And when I first started there, I was really fighting for my credibility since I didn't come from a research background. And when they would come over and see some guy reading a comic book, they'd be like, "Ugh, what I got here?" Or I would go into meetings and they would be like, "Yeah, this is the guy who's coming to train us. I saw him reading a comic book on the train." So it just really began to affect my credibility, at least in my mind. But like I said, since people would bring it up, and then I'd get those comic book elitist vibes where people sit down and go, "Oh, you're reading a comic book. I don't do comic book." People just kind of would see it and kind of be like, "Ugh." So that's when I actually started reading hero prose, because I could take a book that's hero prose, and most 90% of the hero prose I read is not Marvel or DC or some set comic book. It's usually hero prose of just a whole new world. So when people would sit down and see me reading a book, even if they peeped the cover, they would go, "What are you reading?" And I would think a science fiction, and their minds would just gloss over and we'd get into whatever we wanted to do. So pretty much, really more like 15 years, hero fiction. I didn't really read a lot of comic books. I still collected some comic books, and maybe, to be honest, I might have read a little bit at home, but not really that much. So I collected comic books, and I, just like I do with my books, I have my comic books I focused on digital comic books, and I collected comic books and digitized them. And, the ones I collected electronically, I always made sure, just like I do with books, I have someplace to store them. I have something to read them on electronically. So all that to be said, I didn't. And I was just recently watching something on YouTube, this guy, Matt with 4 T's. And he has this channel where he kind of does a deep dive into the history of notable graphic artists, comic strips, comic books, notable people. And watching a couple of his videos, I was just like, my gosh, it reminded me that I love comic book fiction, but you can't beat comic books sometimes, mainly because comic books are just like a fast food rush of a quick hit of color and words and just kind of everything mixed into one. And one other thing that brought me to this is I've really been trying to stretch my boundaries. So instead of reading books that are totally in my wheelhouse, that I'm going to read and blast through, I've been trying to read books that are in different genres. And some of those are pretty tough reads for me. So I've had to read them in shorter lengths, take breaks and things like that. And so I kind of thought, if I start reading comic books again, then I can kind of take a break from reading a book and read a comic book. Because right now I'm doing everything I can to reduce my TV time. And TV time also means YouTube time, because I watch almost all my YouTube on my TV. But just to reduce my TV time. And one other thing I'm really think about, for me at least, is I really want to make sure that I'm always reading. There was a span of about 7 years where I just didn't read anymore, and so that is important to me, to not read as much as I can, but just to always have something to read. So yeah, between reading books, I could take a break and watch TV or something. But I think I'm going to make the choice that if I'm reading a book and I need a break, I'm going to take a break and read a comic. So in some of these videos, that's going to come up some of the comics that I've acquired, some of the comics that I've read. I don't know whether I'm going to mix it in or break it apart, but it's going to be interesting to see, how I get back into reading comic books. I mean, right now I'm at the age where if somebody sees me reading a comic book, I don't care, But at the time, it was important to me to kind of, make my name and fit in and not be that guy. So I put the link to Matt with 4Ts and a couple videos that really kind of interested me. I mean, right after I saw those videos, I went out and bought some books from the graphic artist who created those comics and cartoons. So I definitely would recommend you check those out. Check out his vids. It was very interesting, and I really liked how he did a deep dive. So I guess that's it. This is probably not, I don't know whether this is, of that much interest to people or not, but this to me is much more of a video diary. Some people call themselves, content creators. I'm not really creating content, and anything could change in a world of, I have this saying, in a world of infinite possibilities, anything is possible. But I really just see this more as a video diary, a way to reach out and talk about the books I read in case people want to comment on them, and just a way to kind of be in a world full of readers. So anyway, I guess that's it. This is Ofori, the digital reader, and I will talk to you later. Keep reading.